it's impossible for an atheist to have any tools to answer this question. Because
It's
atheists...
impossible for anybody to answer this question.
No. I would say that atheism has nothing to offer.
Oh, sorry.
It has no explanatory power. Pantheism has something, polytheism has something, monotheism has everything else, but that atheism has no explanatory power whatsoever at this point.
You think you need the metaphysics?
That's why I'm not an
to answer
atheist.
that question.
See, this is how we slowly get them out of...
Yeah, do you believe you have to have
You gotta get
Pardon?
the
do
gotcha
you believe you have
moment.
to have a metaphysical basis to address the question? You
Yeah.
can't answer the question without metaphysics. You can only answer it with metaphysics.
I think that foundationally, it's an intuitive metaphysics, so yeah, in that sense.
Intuitive.
Remember we said that...
But you said humans have intrinsic.
Yeah, that's a
belief in God,
metaphysics.
But I think that's a belief. Is that that's?
Yeah, but it's not something physical, is it? Because metaphysics is that which is not physical.
Do you feel you have
What did you say about
do you believe you have an innate disposition to believing in God? Do you think
You
there's
know,
something in you?
that is a very interesting thing that we could talk about, and I actually changed my mind about that. Nowadays, most people who live have some kind of faith, some kind of belief. Maybe in a God, maybe in an entity, maybe in energy. Some people just believe in energy.
But in a higher source, in a higher
Yeah,
power. right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Most people, the vast majority of people, have some kind of belief. And why is that? Why is it that the vast majority of people come to that conclusion? Well, because the people who chose a purpose for them, who chose to believe in something, are the ones who were more competitive in the game of life previously. They are the ones whose genes were passed on and whose similarities were passed on to their children, and thus it has been accumulated with generations and generations and generations that people have this, most of the people have this idea that something must exist beyond me. You know what I mean?
It's every civilization in history. There is no example
Exactly.
of a prehistoric or
Exactly.
historic.
So it seems like an inbuilt
There's no
design,
atheist
right?
civilization in history.
Yeah, that's
ever.
the,
Well,
yeah,
Because
that's
they
what I'm
chose
saying. Yeah.
purpose
You
for
could look at it
themselves.
as an outgrowth of the analytical capacity of the human mind. Because we look for actors within the world.
Yeah.
We see someone doing something, we infer a motivation. We see something in the natural world.
Yeah.
We naturally want to infer a conscious motivation.
Agency, yeah.
Agency, exactly. So that is more or less an explanation for the outgrowth of a spiritual tradition, I would say.
One of the explanations.
That's an explanation,
Yeah.
for example.
So you
What
would
I
say
wanted
it's-
to find out from you is if you're saying if there is a something instead of nothingness.
So I'm sorry, the brother here was just asking me a question. I'll come to you. Yeah.
You mentioned that there is a something,
Yeah.
and that something, is there a time where that something will cease to exist, or will that something exist forever?
So my understanding is that if there's something rather than nothing, for that something to be in existence, it must depend on something that is always in existence.
Always in existence.
Yeah, because if it isn't, then how do we explain its existence?
Maybe we can't.
No, and this goes back to the question of, and this is what I like, the dependency argument for the God's existence, right? I say something has got to be necessary in its existence, something which has no
Argument for
beginning.
contingency is called, yeah?
Pardon?
Argument for contingency.
Yes. So
Why do we assume that?
because you can't have an infinite regress of dependent things.
This is a philosophical point again.
No, you can. You can have an infinite regress. The point, I mean, mathematically speaking, is a bit tough. But I think the point is very simple. Our mind requires something to be eternal, whether it's the universe itself or God. The Big Bang theory seems to suggest that the universe is a contingent thing, but it doesn't prove that the universe is a contingent thing. So I think that the Big Bang theory suggests the universe has a beginning, and therefore it may suggest that there might be something that causes existence. So now, whether it is God or the spaghetti monster, the point is that whatever you call it, friend, God, the point is that it has certain characteristics which are is timeless, spaceless, and probably it has the power to cause something. And that's the traditional view of God.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the whole thing with the spaghetti monster, the problem with it is that it's not power, it's not timeless.
I mean,
and
it's
space.
a man. I mean, of course, it's an object. Yeah, so it's not like something like consciousness or whatever.
So that's what I'm saying. The thesis that there's something which is necessary existence is a very compelling thesis. Now,
I think it's a good argument.
Yeah, but the thing is that the nature of it can't be really. We can't really speculate on the nature of it. Like you said, necessity, eternality, oneness, and the fact that it's not made out of parts or dependent parts. You can go that far, but you can't say that. Well, it's loving, it's merciful.
But to make it even simpler, I don't know if you know William Craig. He put it like very simple, because he said, suppose that you got an explanation for something, which makes sense. Like for example, say you find like machines on the backside of the moon, and you say, oh, there must be intelligence here.
Yeah.
And if you don't know where this intelligence comes from, or you know how it looks like, what it looks like, it doesn't mean that you need to reject the explanation. So the explanation is still good, even if you don't know where this intelligence comes from, or what it looks like. Because by doing so, you don't have explanation what's happening. So I think it's a very good argument. I think atheists struggle with it here.
Yeah, I think they would.
I'm still trying to understand from a human mind the way we create stories. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. From what you're saying, that beginning has always been infinite, has always been there. So we can't actually trace when it started. That's what you're saying.
So we need something which has no beginning.
So it has no beginning and it has no end. And we, as humans, we're just simply passing through from that existence.
So we're explicable, or where the preponderance of the universe is explained through this necessary eternal agency. That everything that's dependent is ultimately dependent on something which is independent. It's as simple as that.
And then all of this, though, comes back to just belief, not evidence.
That's actually something which is quite rational. So this is, remember we talked about different fields of knowledge. This is more deduction now. Yeah, so this is something we're rationalizing.
Okay, there's a little problem in this ideology. So we are denying the infinite regression, instead choosing that, okay, there is a beginning cause, right, which you call God.
But before you continue, I think you mentioned causation. Causation is not always required for dependency.
In which way?
So you can have something which depends on something else and which is not caused by it. Let me give you an example, right? So for example, I can build a house. So I'm the cause for a house being built, But I die and the house continues living, right? So the house is not dependent on me, but it's caused by me. You see that point? So the person who built this building behind us, or the people, they caused it to exist. Or maybe the horse head didn't build them, they caused it to exist. But that horse head no longer depends on
but for there to be more houses, there need to be more people building the
Accepted. But so what I'm saying is causation, which is defined as something which brings rise to phenomena, is different to dependency, which means something relying on something else. So for the house doesn't require those people that built it to rely on it. So when we say that everything dependent depends upon something else which is dependent, then you need to have something independent to allow all dependent things to exist. And not necessarily every cause has every effect has a cause, although that can be made. Same argument can be made.
Not necessarily
in
every
conjunction.
effect has a cause.
Yeah, because you can say, look, you can say, for the sake of argument, I'm going to have an infinite regress of causes. And like you said, it's conceivable. It's not.
Yeah, it's conceivable.
Even though I would say it's pretty difficult to conceive.
Yeah, it's hard to confuse, but it can be.
It's almost. I would say. I would say it's for me it's illogical, but I can understand why someone would say that it's a timeless, there's a multiverse backwards. Yeah, I can understand why. But then the question would be, what does that multiverse depend on?
Nice talking to you anyway.
You too, man.
I'll see you always.
So that's what.
The problem of.
But there's one thing I want to say. Like that's from our theological Islamic perspective. If you look at the basic definition of God, it's literally that. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, he's one and only, Allahu samad, the thing that everything depends upon, and he depends upon nothing, the independent one basically, that is eternal, lam yalid wa lam yulad, that there's no, he doesn't give birth nor is he to give birth, you know, so, wa lam yakul lahu, there's nothing like him, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad, there's nothing like him, so he's the necessary existence. So what we would say is that William Lane Craig, you mentioned him, he would take it that far, he would agree with these points, but then he would say God is 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, which is Trinity God. We would say that's problematic.
Trinity out.
So that's why we would say, look.
But I think it doesn't really matter this.
Yeah, Trinity doesn't.
I think the problem with religions. They can be right, all of them. So one of them can be right, but I think that one of them can be right, but I think that all of them, they try to use God arguments, like which philosophical arguments that are really good, and they try to track them back to their religion. I think it's not very fair, because there's no direct connection between Islam and the God hypothesis. There's no direct connection between the Christians and the God hypothesis. So I think that the God hypothesis is something that needs to be taken separately, and then you can move to.
I think I actually agree. I agree with you.
Move to religion.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But I think there is very good evidence for God.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure.
What evidence is that?
Wait.
What we were just
Before we
discussing.
go, this is a completely different ramification of the conversation. But we need to know this. But before you do it, let me just clarify what I was saying a while ago. The same way that you use God to get out of the infinite regression paradox, God also is an infinite regression by himself, because God is infinite. And no matter how
But it
you
wouldn't
try
be a
to-
regression because it wouldn't go back. It just stays
Well,
back.
Not
if God is
necessarily, because it's
infinite,
just,
there are many parts of infinity that contradict each other. If God is infinite in
But we
wisdom,
wouldn't
knowledge,
say that.
benevolence,
We wouldn't say that is infinite.
power,
Say that
they
is eternal.
contradict each other.
The thing is, we haven't got to that stage yet, as we said, right?
Yeah.
He's right. The point that he made is interesting. Let me just quickly mention it. So he said that you're right. I would agree with you that you can't really say, okay, well, this is the God of, like I just said, right? This is the God of Quran, whatever, and therefore you have to be Muslim. That would be a ridiculous argument. But what we can do is we can say anything that does not fit these parameters that we've just talked about would be problematic because it's illogical. So, for example, if I said, oh, if God is a man, sorry to say, yeah? So, well, if you say God is a man, that denies his the eternity, the necessity, the so on and so forth. So we might not be able to.
The Christian God,
But we might. So what I'm saying is that we might not be able to prove religion necessarily in that sense, but we can dismiss religion. So we can say, look, this religion that chicken is God or a goat is God or a human being is God is a false religion because it says that something which is meant to be unlimited is limited at the same time, which is a contradiction.
If
So,
God
and-
has
yeah,
unlimited
yeah,
power,
yeah.
he has the power to limit his power, to limit himself,
then-
or even to
I
destroy himself.
don't see any contradiction there.
No, but hold on.
Yeah.
But then, can I just come back on that? If God limits his power, if this necessary existence limits his power
Yeah.
to being not to being limited, then it stops being the necessary existence.
Well, he still has the possibility of coming back
No,
to
but
how
then it would
was,
stop being God, right?
like Jesus.
No, but here's the thing: how would the question would be, what would be the explanation for the universe in that stage, or for existence?
No, it's to
The
put-
God, okay, the explanation
You see
for
what I'm
the
saying?
universe. I know.
Yeah.
Let's imagine, for example, that I share your belief in God. In that case, the God who created the universe and who made everything, exist, he decided eventually to remove most of his power.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
universe was still started
Then
by
that-
that God.
then that God is
who
no longer
removed
God,
power because he stopped being God. He
Yeah, yeah.
removed the power.
So that's fine.
from
So you have no
himself.
God now. So now we have an atheistic world, right?
Well, without that initiation, without that beginning,
Yeah.
there's still the universe that God
Here's what I'm
created.
trying to say is that a necessary existence, by definition, can never cease to be. Because a necessary existence is something that can never be imagined in any other way. It's eternally one way. It can never change. It's something which is, in a sense, unchanging, right?
Look, but in that case,
Nothing can supervene on the nature of his necessity. So nothing can change him from being always there and always powerful. Now, if something does change that, then what we have is a state of affairs where existence becomes inexplicable again. So in other words, you always have to have a necessary existence that's eternal. If you don't have that, and you say, well, that necessary existence can limit itself, then in effect, that necessary existence would be a contingent existence. It would be a possible existence. It would no longer be a necessary existence. It would be something which can be envisaged in another way, and the universe and everything around us, even ourselves' existence, would not be explicable anymore. Therefore, a self-limiting God is no God at all. It's no God at all. If a God can limit himself and become a chicken or become an egg, then that thing that you were conceiving in the first place was no necessary existence. It was no God. It was something else that you thought was God.
In that case, he's not omnipotent.
Sorry, you need to explain that.
I can follow you.
So the God up there has the power to manifest himself as something small. That then limits.
No, what I'm saying is that if that does happen, then that's not possible. So if any of the natural attributes of this necessary being are limited, then that thing which we're talking about can't be God, because God is meant to be eternally powerful, eternally the same. Nothing changes God, nothing changes his nature, and so on. So if now it's limited, if the unlimited can limit themselves, then they become limited, and if they become limited, then it becomes inexplicable our existence or the existence for any possible existence. So in other words, an all-powerful God can always only be all-powerful. There can never be a stage where the all-powerful can be anything other than all-powerful. The necessary can be anything other than necessary.
So then what you're saying would challenge the gods of, say, the Olympian gods, that the ancient Greeks believed where that God would come down and manifest as
No question. Monotheistic gods
in regards to what we were saying about existence always being there, never having a beginning, a middle, or an end, fine. If I choose to go down that path and believe in that, and it then comes back to the fact that I do not have evidence to prove that, am I then having some form of mental delusion? Or is that a natural form of rational thought to think that even though I cannot provide evidence, because I feel like that, then it must be the case?
Sorry, so beginning, middle, and end, what
No, if I believe in the existence has always been there, that something has always been there.
Yes.
And I believe that something is a creator.
Yes.
And is responsible for my creation.
Yes.
And even though I choose to go down that path, believe in it, but I cannot provide evidence for it, am I suffering from a mental delusion?
No, because you can't provide evidence for your own existence.
Okay.
None of us here can provide rational evidence for our own existence. So it's not always the case that something has to be verified inductively in order for it to be sensical or taken as a form of knowledge. Something can be something you feel. Like emotions are inexplicable. You cannot put happiness under a microscope. You can put your brain under a microscope and say, okay, well, hold on, these parts of
dopamine under the microscope.
Yeah, but you can say this is when happiness happens, the brain works in that way. But correlation doesn't always mean causation, so you don't know what's causing what. Is it the happiness that is causing this, or is it that that's causing the happiness?
That's the body mind problem. It's a quite a big one.
So I guess what I'm saying is that we can start eliminating things like pantheism and polytheism and conceptions of God, like you just mentioned, because they contradict the logical order. And I would also add to that, they contradict the intuitive order. No one is born believing that Zeus is God. No one is born believing that Muhammad is a messenger. No one is born believing that Jesus is God.
I don't think we can quite eliminate them. I'll tell you why.
Go.
Because, again, let's imagine that I share your belief, your monotheistic belief.
Yeah.
As you know, as you believe in, there is a devil. And there are angels, and there are jinns.
That's more of a religious narratives.
What if, just like God created the devil, God could have created the Olympian gods, or the Roman gods, or whatever pantheon he decided to create? Entities that are much less powerful than God himself, but that still exist, like the devil exists. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
It could be, but we have
we can't eliminate.
Yeah, but we have evidence for them. Have we got evidence for them?
But the pantheon,
the same evidence we got for
the pantheon that you're talking about.
For the one God.
It's not the same.
I mean, in which sense you say that there is? So the arguments for contingency, you don't find it convincing.
Argument
For
for
God.
contingency.
Yeah, for contingency. The argument we've just spoken about.
That everything dependent has to
Yeah.
initially go back to something independent.
Yeah, the infinite, the one again.
We have evidence that suggests, at least suggests the universe has a beginning, but it suggests, they don't prove, but it suggests the universe has a beginning. So this could be to be seen as an evidence for a being which like God. Then we got other evidence, for example, the design argument, which is quite powerful.
No, not at all.
Oh, no? Okay.
It's the watchmaker fallacy.
Okay. No, it's not.
Listen.
No, it's quite powerful. Okay.
Do you not find this?
Intentionally designs things to suffer and designs it in a way that's
Okay, so
incredibly inefficient.
no, wait a second. So we are moving from the design argument to the evil argument.
No, it doesn't even
Okay.
be evil.
Okay, it's not because you said the problem of suffering.
I
Yeah?
said suffering, something's not evil.
Okay. So, okay, let's go one each first. Design argument. Okay, design argument is not just about what you make or whatever. It's not just about the complexity of life,
arguments.
the reducible complexity, and all
I want
sorts
your
of-
arguments.
Okay, so the problem of the beginning of the universe is also the fine-tuning of the physical law. Okay.
You know the really easy counter argument to that is there's life here because
There's so many
it's
counter
right for
arguments.
life to
Okay,
be
but
here.
let's-
Otherwise there wouldn't
okay,
be
this,
life.
this is called the anthropic principle. Yeah? So that so we're here because there were the condition for us, to rise. Yeah. So, but this doesn't follow from this argument. Doesn't follow that this was by chance.
Why?
Okay, it could be by chance or design because it's very simple. So suppose that
You're gonna give me John Leslie's example of the
wait a
guy
second.
shitting on the
No,
wall.
Yeah. So
You
Leslie,
can-
okay, Leslie, yeah, he's a philosopher who said, suppose that you're in front of some soldier that are about to shoot you, yeah, and you're there.
Why are we using these metaphors
Okay.
to describe
No, wait a
metaphysical
second.
reality?
No, I'm trying to make the point. Let me finish the point and then. Okay, they're about to shoot and you're there. They shoot and you. Wow, I'm still alive. Incredible. Why is he so impressed that he's alive? Of course he's alive because if he had got him, he would have been dead. But still, you need to wonder, you need to question yourself: were they soldiers drunk, or they did it on purpose? So the anthropic principle doesn't solve the problem whether there is
chance.
is a design or chance. It doesn't answer the question. It's just a statement of the factual fact that we need certain conditions for life to be, but it doesn't explain nothing. It's simply
to explain it.
no, it's just a matter of fact. Of course, you don't need to be hit by the soldier in order to be alive. Of course, that's a matter of fact, but it doesn't explain whether the soldier did it on purpose or
A question that
it
I
was.
wanted to raise
So
when you guys
so
were
the
talking.
anthropic principle is not an argument at all against the
But
fine-tuning.
actually,
running
you're
on
right because
assumptions that we can't prove.
Richard Dawkins even mentions that. He says that I don't
We're
believe
running
in
on assumptions that we
anthropic.
can't prove.
Exactly.
So it's not like there's a high ground.
That's
Which
what it
assumption?
always comes to when we
Which
speak
assumption?
about infinity. Infinity
No,
is an
which
idea that goes beyond our logic. It breaks
Something that I wanted to say is that when we talk about this idea of, I think the words don't help us, like with creator and God and such, because we seem to imagine a being, right? So my question is like, why do some people infer that this entity has a will? It seems to have
Okay,
a will
good.
to do
Yeah.
things. Why
Okay.
could it not be a spontaneous force that creates spontaneously?
There are some arguments for
How do you
this.
describe it
There are
well?
some arguments for that. You wanna-
One of the arguments is simply because God wanted us to be here. He wants to create such a being like us, for example,
But why?
to experience life.
But then I could say, what's the why to that? What's the logic to that? What's the reason to that? And there wouldn't be much of
In
it.
the
But-
same,
but
in the same
before-
way
but-
as parents wants to make a child.
Before we get to what's your name again,
We're
bro?
equating man to God.
What's your
Yeah,
name?
but
Then we're,
yeah, but
then
the
we're
child of
making-
parents is equal to the parents. We are not equal to God. At least that's what you advocate for.
No, but you're not responding to my argument.
I am
said-
responding to your
no.
argument.
Let me
Because you
come in-
can't
let me come in
compare
for a second.
God creating
'Cause-
humans to parents creating a child, because parents are equal to the child they create. God is not equal to the humans he
Yeah,
creates.
but I mean,
at least according to you.
I mean, in some religion, of course, you
Yeah,
have
not in
that-
this religion. Not
no,
in
I mean, in some
monotheistic
religion. I mean, in different concept of God, God created us on His own image. For
He's
example.
equal to us.
Huh?
He's equal to us.
No, in His own image means that He created us.
No, but Pavlov, there's
as-
another. Sorry,
Yeah.
one more
I
thing.
wanna know the
In
answer to that,
in
though.
terms of the will argument,
Okay.
because you asked. Now, first of all, one could argue we don't even need to go there in a sense.
I would like an answer. though.
No. I mean, I will definitely give you one.
But then we go. But then I want to go to.
No,
the
I'll give you.
problem.
I'll give you what people have said.
But then I want to go to the problem.
Yeah, of course.
The
Problem of evil.
Yeah, the problem.
Well, one thing at a time, guys. One thing at a time. Let's not convolute. Let's not muddy the waters. So, in terms of the will, there's a theory called the theories of particularization. Now, the theory of particularization, or which referred to as takhsis, is written about by the medieval scholars. Is the idea that, for example, this cup here is one way rather than another way. So this cup here, for example, let's say it's a white cup, right? So it could have been a black cup. It's conceivable that it could have been a red cup or an orange cup. Of
course.
Okay. So the fact that it's one way rather than another,
You're going for Plato.
the question, no, not Plato. The question is that why is it one way rather than another way, right? So the fact that it could have been another way, and it's actually this way, implies that there's an external sorting mechanism. Now, for example, in the world that we live in, someone decided that I'm going to make this paper here going to be white rather than black. Some mind decided that. Some will decided that, right?
Just like God.
No, in this world here, right? So, for example, some guy in a factory.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, but it's,
Yeah.
it's equating that to
So,
God.
so the
attributes of
so
man.
so
give
the argument
to God.
the argument is that the fact
in a-
that
in
the universe is
philosophy,
the fact that the universe is one way rather than another way implies that there's an external sorting mechanism. Just in the same way as you would imply if you see anything that can be conceived of in another way. Now, however, if you're not convinced with that argument, I'll say no problem.
Well, I just
Because the point is,
It's a lot like Plato, really, like Plato's world of perfect
Forms.
Of forms.
No,
exactly.
it's I'll tell you where it corresponds with Plato. Plato says that there's an infinite amount of possibilities, and they're not actualized in the real world. So there's a mode of forms out there which has all of the other possibilities
The
in there.
absolute shape of everything.
Shapes, numbers, whatever. Yeah.
Ideas.
So he believed in that because he realized that how could it be that everything that could potentially be is not in reality. So he said there must be some realm out there which supersedes the realm that we live in. The point I'm making,
I disagree with him, by the way.
it's neither here nor there. I mean, lots of people disagree with him. But the point I'm making is that the fact that you have something which is one way when there was a choice, X amount of choices, suggests that there was an external sorting mechanism that decided on the choice. That decision is referred to as a will, because when you have so many different choices and there's one thing, because this is what one scholar, his name is Abu Bakr al-Baqillani, Arabic scholar, yeah? By the way, William Lane Craig takes all of his stuff from these guys, yeah? Just to let you know.
I know.
He wrote in his book called Tamheed, he goes this, he says, look, he actually mentions a jug. So it's handy that we have a cup in front of us. So look, you have a cup, or let's say you have a jug. It's shaped in one way rather than another way. There was, let's say, an infinite amount of shapes this cup could have been. But it's this shape rather than X, Y, way, right? So he said, there's only, if you think about it, there's only 2 or 3 options you can think about as to why this cup is shaped in this way. Option A is that it has intrinsic qualities that allowed for it to be shaped in this way. So in other words, the cup has within it attributes that mean that it had to be like that. Right. So he says that, but if that was the case, everything with the same qualities would pop into existence at the same time. Because if it was self-explainable, and it's not explainable by an external sorting mechanism, then all of the things with exactly the same qualities would be in existence at the same place at the same time. So he says that if it was self-caused in that sense, self-caused, then it would be, then all of the things which have similar attributes would be self-caused in the same place in the same time. However, he says that that's illogical and impossible because we don't see that happening. Therefore, you require some external sorting mechanism to decide on one rather than A rather than B, basically. The fact that you have A's rather than B's is evidence that you have someone deciding that A should be instead of B and B should be instead of A.
Let me give a different angle on this. Let's say that everything came into being at one point of time. Let's say this universe, right? The Big Bang type of idea. And this is something that's fascinating, is rather than we take individual objects or qualities of objects,
Sorry.
rather than individual qualities of objects, we can take the reason why this is the way it is by the laws of physics, the physical laws of the universe. You understand me, right? The interactions between the quantum particles and things of a larger scale.
Yeah.
These determine why things are the way they are. So the real interesting question, in my estimation, with physics is what is the constituent nature of the laws of physics? You understand? Like gravity, for example, this idea. What is that force made of? What does it do? How does it work? How does it interrelate? Because it seemingly is beyond the physical or something like that. Obviously, I don't understand it very well, but you understand what I'm saying? It's beyond matter. It's the interactions of matter.
Yes.
And what are the
You're talking about the
made of?
uniformity of nature. Why is nature designed in this? Or why is it
nature of
arranged
the-
in this way?
It's the substance of the laws of the arrangement.
And that goes into
that's
his
a really
fine tuning.
interesting
That's basically what he's saying,
The
right?
fine-tuning argument
Potentially,
is a very good argument.
But I can't assume
You know why?
a chooser.
Because there is, I mean, in philosophy now, it's quite agreed that there is
Constants, like gravitational constants.
Two main alternatives. One is the multiverse hypothesis, because this accounts for, because if it has an infinite number of universes with different sets of laws, therefore
all the possibilities are manifest.
it may be possible that there is a universe with these laws. But if there is no multiverse, then the fine-tuning argument is pose a
But can I
very
say?
big question.
I would only disagree with you a little bit on this. I'll tell you why. I think that they changed the question. I'm not they. I mean, atheist propagandists. Not you.
Come on.
You're not a new atheist.
I'm not an atheist.
And I'll explain why. The question we are asking is that what's the possibility that these constants that we have, like for example the gravitational constant or whatever other constant,
Planck constant.
Or
Yeah.
by chance.
or by chance. So in this case, the null hypothesis is chance. So we have two things that we're putting against each other. Either these constants were designed, and the null hypothesis.
Alternatives or
Not really. Not really. There's only. It's not
Yeah,
only two
necessity is another thing.
alternatives.
This is a good point. This is a good point.
Necessity as well. Which is the
let's-
third.
Something interesting.
Let me make a. Well, let me make a point there.
Necessity, you're right,
is that
but that's impossible. It's impossible.
No, it's not that it's possible. It's just it doesn't make sense.
if we're the problem I have when we go down these lines of argumentation is that we're always looking at it by necessity from a human perspective, by the rules that we somehow have
Yeah.
inbuilt
Yeah, but we
within our-
discuss from a human perspective otherwise.
Well,
so what's the point of discussing
Well,
then?
the point is that
So what's the point of discussing?
I think you're interrupting me because I'm making a good point.
Okay, sorry, carry on.
Let him.
So, when we're imagining beyond this realm, we're beyond the universe where this God maybe resides, or however you imagine it, we're still ascribing the rules and laws and the ways that humans think upon God. I don't think it's reasonable to do that. I think this force might operate under any known rationale that we can maybe not imagine.
But what? Going back to the fine-tuning
I
point.
don't know how you can get.
It's like a bi-dimensional being trying to understand a three-dimensional being. It
right.
won't happen. No
Yeah, but
matter how
that's,
hard it tries.
but yeah, I understand that. But I mean, according to fears, God created us.
Are you from Portugal or Brazil?
No, I'm Italian.
What is it? I don't know.
So, according to fears, God gave us logic and the apparatus of whatever. Fears.
Very
So,
broad
in order to discover Him as well as to discover the universe or the laws of physics or whatever, also to discover Him. So that's why the same way we reason on a day-to-day basis should be helpful to get to the
So
truth.
maybe you're right. But so maybe God is analogous to the laws of the universe, the physical laws of the universe.
No, because I'll tell you what.
Functionality.
It's not the same thing.
But we do discover that. We use our tools and abilities of our mind to discover how, in a way, how the world works, how the universe works. Of course. And then we might extend that to realms that we can't perceive, that we imagine to exist, the metaphysical realm, and we project ourselves upon that.
Yeah, it could
But
be.
the laws of the universe are not an actual entity, in the sense that
might be.
No, in the sense that they don't actually exist. The reason why we say that they exist, like for example, the constants that we're talking about, like
That was the previous
Yeah.
point. They
So-
might have a constituent.
So all we're looking at is arrangements. Like for example now, if I was to look at the tree and say, okay, let's create laws about the tree. Say, well, I'm going to group the tree's interaction with each other in the following way: X, Y, Z. Yeah, or I'm going to group colors into the following schema: X, Y, Z. So really what I'm doing is it's a human project that I'm trying to say, okay, let me look at the patterns that exist in nature historically.
That's our main method.
Yeah, and then see if there's any recurrence. And these are the laws of nature, right?
Yeah,
but so the laws
sense.
of nature don't actually exist in as much the same way as animal. The universal animal doesn't exist. If I say, look, animal doesn't exist, what do you mean by that? I say, look, human being doesn't exist. Human beings exist. So for example, if I say to you, human being as a category, as a master class universalist category, doesn't actually exist in the real world. You can't find a human being, but you can find human beings in the sense that how do we group human beings into one thing? We say, okay, well, if everything has similarities between different classes, right, genuses. So I say, okay, well, this is similarity A. They will group them, we'll cluster them into this, right? But this,
it's pretty much like saying
that categorization,
because what is a chair is
yeah.
made of 4 legs.
So it's like set theory. Set theory is like that. So that's why, by the way, that's one of the things Gödel was very powerful in making the point of. He said, look, set theory, is the set in the set theory, like, because set theory is you've got like in mathematics, you've got X amount of numbers, yeah, or patterns, whatever, numerical patterns, sequences. Now you have those. Is the masterclass sequence? Does that go underneath? Is it categorized? Is it part of this sequence as well?
The problem of identity that we're in.
He was saying that it's a contradiction in a sense, right? So it's a problem with categorization. Now, the same thing is the laws of nature don't exist as an entity of three-dimensional proportions.
Well, they might be beyond here, yes.
But what we do
say
have,
it's effect.
we have the way we perceive nature, we refer to as laws. Now, but the more foundational question is, why is nature arranged in this way? Which seems to have continuity, basically, right? You can call it the continuity of nature in certain ways. So why is that? Now, what can explain that? Either you have chance, or you have a deliberation. So either it's chance in the sense that, so there's two things. Either chance.
But the point he was making is that this could be a man.
No. But what I'm saying is the null hypothesis.
I was saying the ideas of God are from our own understanding.
Yeah. So
But before that, so the laws of nature don't exist for us to say, oh, that's God, in a sense. But the secondary thing is this: is that you see the whole multiverse thing. The issue with it is this: we have a question, a mathematical question from total probability theory. We're saying, what is the probability that the universe could have these constants which are continuous, right? So
How do we assess this probability?
we assess it by so we make. Let me explain. So if I say the question, what is the probability that the constants, which are basically historical interactions between different elements of that which we can observe in the cosmos, interact with each other in X-ray, what is the probability that could have been a chance? So what I'm doing is I'm deliberately making I'm making chance the null hypothesis. What the most common atheistic objection to this is that actually usually, all right, no, not you, no, but I'm not. That's why I'm just saying the most common objection. Think about atheists, agnostic, whatever. The objection is usually this: is usually that the null hypothesis should be the multiverse, the infinite multiverse, right? So instead of now the null hypothesis being chance, the null hypothesis becomes an infinite universe, right? Now, there's two issues. Obviously, the first one is we don't have any evidence of that infinite universe. But the other issue of this is you're changing the question effectively. You're changing the question of something that is what is the possibility that this universe could have been that could exist with these proportions? That's question A. We're changing it from this universe, which is a definite clause in the English language, to an indefinite. So we're saying now, question changes to what? What is the possibility that a universe, indefinite, can be, with these proportions. Now, if you say a universe and you make the null hypothesis an infinite multiverse, then you have the possibility of anything existing, including what, by the way? Including the truth of religion. No. Because there's a possibility that Muhammad existed and that he was a true prophet. That possibility materializes somewhere, right? In the multiverse. So if you make the null hypothesis an infinite universe, you have everything. Everything is possible, basically, literally. So, but that's
the case.
Yeah.
Everything is possible.
So
in a certain
then,
realm of
so
reality.
But now let's
yeah.
engage
So
this.
then Islam is the only religion to say
wasn't making the
that
argument that
it's
you
the only true
proposed.
religion. So you have to, if that's possible, then it's true. I'm gonna jail. I'm just being facetious. Yeah.
Even though you
I
like
like
to
it,
brand
guys.
everyone.
I like
hates it.
it.
But guys, it's been a pleasure. I'm gonna walk around.
I need to go. Are you next Sunday? I'm gonna come back.
It's been good, man. Thank you very much. Man.
Next time, if you're here next
you.
Sunday.
What's your name, bro?
We're here on Sunday.
Jan.
Nice to meet you.
I have a very good friend of mine. I grew up with him.Is name is Jan as well. All right. أنت okay. السلام عليكم. كيف حالك؟ ها؟ Salam Sheikh. How you doing? You okay? You alright? Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Yeah, not bad.
Assalamu alaikum. Is this one, brother? Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Hope you enjoyed that. It was a bit of a long one. It's finally over. Hashim's asking. Say assalamu alaikum to everyone. Hashim is live.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. From Speaker's Corner,
How's it been today, Hashim?
another Sunday. It's been alright. I came a bit late today. I had a few earlier commitments, so that's the reason I couldn't come early. But alhamdulillah, I think from the turnout, considering the weather is good as well, so alhamdulillah.
You come early majority of the year, so it's alright. We'll allow you.
Let me off this time.
Yeah, inshallah, we'll do live ones. There's Sheikh Muhammad. Say assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Muhammad.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
May Allah bless you for your knowledge, my brother.
وياك جزاك الله خير. وياك.
Omani style. What's
يعني between Oman.
He's there.
You couldn't make up his mind this morning.
Evolution of the turban. May Allah bless him. Yes. Okay, guys, we're gonna cut off now. It's been a while, as you can see. It's coming up to Maghrib. Hey, assalamu alaikum, akhi. How you been? You okay? Huh? I've been on live.
No.
Which one, brother?
I had my headphones on.
I don't know. I'm not sure, brother. The camera guy. The camera guy? Yeah, he's Muslim. Yes. Wa alaikum assalam, akhi. Jazakallah khair. And his brother Mansoor, we're recording this talk for you guys. And you should be, you should have it online a little bit later today, inshallah. He said something about subscribing to SC Dawah. That's excellent. Okay, brothers and sisters, jazakallah khair for your support. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.